going to tell you a story. I'm 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 going to tell you a story.
Aurora Wasteland Quarantine by Vaughn Ashby. Episode 5. The previous inhabitant left a guide. Intro from the narrator. So the virus took over our lives, and we adapted to it. We changed the way we lived our lives to avoid it, which changed life. People that could worked remotely. Interacting with friends and family was done through a screen. Life was altered. Some would argue for the worse, others for the better. But like it did with the dinosaurs, life found a way. The word Zoom is now part of the human existence. It will forever be associated with video chats. The term zoomed is now linked with having just chatted with someone while being able to see their face, but not experience their bad breath. This was a good change. The number of wasted time interactions before video chat was thrust out into the public was way too damn high. I don't need to experience the presence of every person I know on my birthday, when a 10-minute video chat will be more than sufficient. Again, this was a good change. But, like with any good change, there are outliers. Some people have a tendency to want to be alone. And in a world where being alone is recommended, those people can drift further than others away from, well, everything. Being alone is a good thing. More people need to be okay with that. No, they need to be proficient at it and enjoy it. But at the same time, others need to be careful with its application. Too much time alone for an untrained, unstable mind can be worrisome. Welcome to the Aurora Wasteland Quarantine. Police report. Late night mall pedestrian remains missing. Alberta. Missing person RCMP. Edmonton, Alberta. RCMP are currently looking for a missing young woman who had last been seen at the City Center Mall located in downtown Edmonton. Staff from the mall have reported an influx of visitors to the mall after closing. They are unsure how patrons are entering or exiting the mall, or what is drawing guests there after closing, though it's believed to be an interdimensional orgy that takes place at the Gap every Tuesday night, as per store policy. Okay, maybe I added the last part, but I mean, come on. You know, if there was going to be an interdimensional orgy, it would 100% be at the Gap. The story. I took the police report, connected it to the other sources, cross-referenced it with the Aurora Wasteland website, and well, ran with it. Below is the story I was able to piece together. Hero's back banged against the bathroom wall. Tile tumbled to the disgusting floor below. His long hair swayed as the beautiful woman he'd only met minutes ago ran her fingers through it. Her lips felt so warm and comforting on his. It had been too long since he'd felt the touch of, well, anything. He wanted to be nowhere but right where he was. She wrapped her arms around him, spreading her warmth, her grip tightening on him. She kissed him hard, her tongue grazing his own. This was comfort, normalcy. He never wanted to leave her. It had been so long that Hero, opened his eyes. The woman no longer looked like the woman he remembered. Her hair was shorter, as was her skirt, and she placed his hand on her thigh. She licked his cheek and lowered his face down towards her cleavage that Hero was sure wasn't there before. He felt comfort, and the urge to never be anywhere else, ever again, migrated along with his blood to his pants. The woman kissed him again as she slid his hand further under her skirt. His fingers reached the warmth of her body under her skirt. She moaned and tightened her grip on him. This was all that Hero had wanted. After all these months alone, he wanted connection, human connection. The woman's moans increased as she pressed his hand further. Only her sounds of lust changed from tribal incoherent passion to words. A single word, actually. One. Over and over, she repeated the word. One. 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 She screamed it over and over again as she inched closer and closer to the edge of pleasure. Then, as she passed over the hill, she pulled him close, unwilling to let him move his hand that was still under her skirt. She smiled at him. One. She kept repeating the word over and over. The tone in her voice quickly changed from lust and passion to boredom as she continued to spout the word one, one, one. Hero tried to pull his hand free, but she continued to not let him. He pulled harder. Still nothing. She wrapped both her hands around Hero's head and pulled him close for a hug. He pulled again. Still, he couldn't pull his hand free. As Hero stared at her through the hug, she kissed his head and the bathroom around them seemed to change. The walls rippled, the tiles spun. The bathroom stalls flickered from existence. The room had been a disgusting mess, an embarrassment to bathrooms everywhere. Now, he didn't know it was a blur, and Nat startled awake. Sweat drenched her clothes. She'd never had a dream like that before. It was so vivid, felt so real, felt so good. God, she'd needed human connection in more ways than one. Through the darkness of her bedroom, the neon green clock on her nightstand told her it was 5 a.m. She had 2 more hours until she had to be up for work. After a few minutes of trying to get comfortable, the soaked pajamas and the nonstop thoughts of how real it felt signaled it was time to get up no matter what time the clock said. Nat fumbled for her glasses and brushed her hair from her face with her fingers. Everything felt so silent. Nat got to her feet and stood in front of the window in her bedroom. The small apartment only had 2 rooms, a bedroom and a living room/kitchen. She hadn't had much of her options. People weren't moving when the virus hit, but she'd broken up with her long-term move-in boyfriend just days before the virus. There was no chance she was going to stick around the apartment and share it with him still there. So she'd found this place. It was one of 2 that were available and that she could afford. It served its purpose. The size of it made it feel more like a shoebox when forced to spend all day, every day in it. If the world had been normal, she'd love it. But now with the virus, her world was smaller than it had ever been. The routine of it all didn't help either. Get up, work, eat, work some more, watch something on TV, read a little, go to bed, all while in the same few feet of living space. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Every single day that passed made her feel more and more like a robot, running on some predetermined automation. Her office had implemented this software that mimicked their real office. Basically, the software had a floor plan of their office, and Nat had to move her little character around as needed. So, if she was sitting at her desk and working, her avatar should be at her desk. If she had to talk to someone, she moved her character to their desk, then called them. And if she had to pee, she moved her avatar to the bathroom. Though she never did that. It felt strange to let the entire office know she was peeing. Instead, she just parked her character at the coffee machine. It was much less embarrassing. She had been working for her current employer for almost a year, and she'd only made one friend, though she would hardly classify him as a friend. They mostly just talked about video games, which was funny given that they worked at a video game company, and everyone talked about a specific video game all day. Nat worked in finance and was one of the only people to not work with the game directly. Her potential friend, Steven, was head of the new technologies team. He was always telling her about the new games on the platforms that she'd never heard of before. He's seen focus mainly on virtual reality lately, which had always interested Nat. She'd spent some of her first paycheck on a pair of VR goggles. As Nat sat down to work after a quick coffee, actually bathroom break, Simon showed up at her virtual desk. Then Nat's phone rang. He told her about a new game he'd played the night before. He said it was so good that you could get lost in it believing it was real. When she asked him about the story, he told her that there was no story. You just did whatever you wanted, and that she'd understand once she tried it. He was going to send a copy of the game over along with the required VR goggles needed. Throughout the conversation, Simon repeated over and over, "It's just so damn good. You don't even know you're in it." That sentence rolled around in Nat's head for the rest of the day. There was no way it could live up to the hype. It was impossible. After work, Nat continued her routine. Eat, watch something on TV, read a little, and just before she went to bed, her phone rang. After the first ring, she knew exactly who it was. There was only ever one person that called her, and it was always at this time of day. Her mother. Like so many mothers and daughters, their relationship was challenging at certain points. It would be great for years, then suddenly her mother would say something about how she should be married already, how she would never be a grandmother, that Nat should return to the country she was born in. No matter what it was, it always led to a period of time where the two women wouldn't speak to each other. As Nat held the phone in her hand, she had flashed back to the previous conversation over a month ago. Her mother had said something about Nat being too much into her work, and that she should find a man so that she could stay at home and have babies. The phone call had ended quickly after that, but something strange happened as Nat held the phone. Unsure of how to start the conversation, Nat's mother apologized. She said she was sorry if she ever made Nat feel less than what she was. She just wanted her to be happy, and that she only now understood that her version of happiness was different from each other. The phone call that night ended with Nat feeling happy and looking forward to talking to her mother again. It was a strange and foreign feeling, but she liked it. The next day, Nat got up and started her routine over again. She sat down, ready for work. There was a knock at her door and a buzz on her phone. It had to be a delivery. Nat jumped from her chair and ran to the door, startling the deliveryman, whom she'd learned was named Vince. He handed her a package, and despite having a fabric mask covering his mouth, he smiled at her. She smiled back and took the package. Before the door was even closed behind her, she was ripping the package open. It was from Steven. The VR game and the glasses he'd promised to send her were in the package. She smiled and tried the glasses on. They were comfortable and light, but seemed to be lacking in the tech department. The glasses barely looked different from a normal pair of glasses. She tossed them on the counter and sat down for work. She'd try them later. Nat answered the call to silence. Maybe he'd dialed her by mistake. Maybe he was being held hostage and this was the last call he'd made from his phone, and all he could manage to do was hit the redial button. Or maybe finally he spoke, repeating a single word over and over again. 2, 2, 2. His tone was flat, frightened, and frightened her more with each repetition. Eventually Nat hung up, and just as she tried to call him back, Nat's phone rang again. There was a different number on the call display, one she'd never seen before. Nat answered it, and was greeted by a somber voice. Her mother had died only hours ago of the virus. Nat dropped the phone. She didn't know anyone who had died of the virus personally. She just witnessed the numbers going up. Her mother had seemed fine on the phone the night before. Did she know that she had the virus? Is that why she was so pleasant and atoning? Tears flooded from Nat's cheeks down to the carpet below. She could still hear the woman on the phone trying to talk to her. Each tear that dropped on the carpet echoed in Nat's ears. It was getting harder to breathe. This couldn't be happening. Her mother couldn't be dead. This wasn't possible. Nat sniffed and glanced down at her hands. They were covered in tears, as was her shirt, pants, and floor. How was this possible? She patted the wet carpet, and it cracked like glass. Light forced its way through, and the crack rippled around her apartment. What was going on? Was she losing her mind? Nat patted her shirt, both hands and clothes shattered, and rained down on the floor like glass, causing a cascade of the world around Nat to vibrate, then shatter. Hero sat on the couch and pulled his VR goggles off. Tears covered his face. How long had he been in there? How long had he been Nat? Had his mother really died? His phone sat next to him. The woman was still trying to talk to him. He picked up the phone and asked her to repeat everything. Frustratedly, she did. His mother had died of the virus. The VR had synced with his phone as advertised. He'd have to tell Steven about the feature. Hero thanked the woman on the phone, but received only silence in return. He asked if she was still there, to which the woman replied with 3, 3, 3. Hero hung up the phone and shook his head. That had happened in the VR. Why was it happening here? Hero placed the VR on the coffee table and went to take in the view from the window. The sun was down and the lights of the city glowed around him. It had been so long since he'd left the apartment. He glanced down at the people in the cars and the others walking along the street. Where were these people going? Bars? Clubs? All gatherings were closed. Hero wiped the tears from his cheeks and thought of going out. He wanted to do it for his mom. She would love it if he would meet someone. But how was he going to do that now? Everywhere was closed. The VR on the table glowed. He slid the goggles back on and accessed his paired phone app. He pulled up his folder for dating apps and scrolled through it. He thought about his mom. She'd want him to meet someone nice. Then he thought about himself and how it had been so long since he'd touched another woman. He opened the app that would hopefully lead to a night full of intimate fun. There were dozens of messages waiting for him, but most were old. He hadn't been on since before the virus hit. It seemed like a waste of time getting to know someone you couldn't see in person for months. He pulled up his matches and filtered to see who was online. There was none. He scrolled for a while, virtually swiping left and right with his eyes through the goggles. Eventually, he hit the end of the potential matches and returned back to his inbox, where he had a new message waiting for him. It was from someone named Beth. He opened the message. It was an invite to a party. He searched for an online meeting URL, but what he found was an actual physical address. He hadn't been to a party in forever, and not just because of the pandemic. He'd never been much of a party person. What was he thinking? Was he actually going to go? First, it was against the current virus safety rules. Second, he had no idea who this woman was. For all he knew, it could be, and likely was, a man. Just as he was about to close the app, a new message popped up. It was from Beth. "You coming tonight?" Hero replied back. Convince me. Beth, are you real? Hero, I am. And are you a dude? Beth, I'm real. So are my boobs. Wanna see? A picture of perky boobs popped up in the chat. Beth, you coming tonight? Hero paused. She seemed real. Well, as real as she could be. He needed to get out. And if he was going out, why not have some fun? Maybe he'd meet his future wife. His mom would love that. Hero, heading out now. Beth, smiley face. As Hero stepped out of his apartment and made his way down the elevator, he realized just how long it had been since he'd left his place. He'd ordered anything he needed. He stepped out the front door of his apartment building and realized it had been months since he'd last been there. The air outside and the sounds of the cars on the street felt so familiar and comforting. Hero's phone binged in his pocket. It was another message from Beth with the address for the party. He typed it into his phone mapping app and started to follow the directions. Every single shop, bar, and restaurant he passed as he walked was closed. Normally, at this time of night, they would be packed with people trying to get in, but not anymore. Life had changed. He hoped that one day things would get back to normal. He forgot how amazing it was to be outside like this. Eventually, the mapping app led him to a mall located in the city's core, no more than 5 blocks from his place. He used to come here all the time for movies and food from the shitty food court when he was younger. The place looked the same, but different too. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe just different stores? No, it was the people, or rather lack of them. There were always people coming in and out of the dozens or so entrances, but now the doors were motionless, and the area around the mall was silent. Hero approached one of the doors and tugged at it. The door opened easily, and he checked his map. It felt strange going into a mall, but the address was leading him in. So he stepped through the doors and into the mall. As he held his phone up to guide him through the last section of his journey, he noticed store after store was closed. He felt bad for the owners. The virus wasn't fair to anyone. But at this moment, he felt terrible for the small business owners. He'd been in many of their shops, though not for a long time now. Even before the virus, it had been years. So many looked the same, well, except for the long closed metal shutters that had layers of dust built up on them. The map led him to the food court, where he circled around it 3 times before he paused at the center and sat down on one of the tables. The place was empty. The address had been wrong. There was no party here. There was nothing here. Hero pulled up the dating app and checked the message Beth had sent him with the address. It matched what he'd entered. Had she lied to him? Tricked him into coming out here? Why would she do that? Through the silence of the mall, a noise built. It rumbled through the quiet air. Eventually, as Hero contemplated what message to send to Beth, a janitor pushing a floor polisher made his way through the food court. Hero jumped to his feet and ran over to him. He showed the janitor his phone and asked him if he knew where the address was. In reply, the janitor simply pointed at a door across the food court marked bathroom, then started repeating 5, 5, 5 over and over again. Hero sprinted for the door and pushed his way inside. As he stepped through, his vision froze, as did his body. A message reading Error Code 8 scrolled across his vision like a news ticker. It scrolled from left to right. As the message vanished off the right side of his vision, Nat stumbled through the door. She shook her head and glanced back behind her. Was she in the VR somehow? She ran her hand over her face, trying to remove the glasses that might be there, but there was nothing. She had no goggles on. The map on her phone flashed that she was in the right location. She changed to her actual phone app, pulled up Steven's number, then hit call. Steven picked up before the second ring. He asked if she tried it. She told him everything, how her mother had died, the dating app, the mall, everything. After she was done, Steven simply laughed and said, "It's smooth like your mama. 13, 13, 13. He repeated the number over and over until Nat hung up the phone. She had to be in the VR, but how was she supposed to get out? Nat tumbled end over end as she rolled down the cold, wet cement staircase she didn't even know was there. She hit the bottom landing and laid in the trickle of water that ran past her. Something warm ran from her nose, down her face, and mixed with the passing stream. Nat sighed and got to her feet. Everything hurt, and she felt like she'd lost a fight. She glanced up the stairs to the door she'd burst through at the top. It seemed like it was miles away and growing. The rhythmic beats of club music emitted from the door next to her. Had there always been a door there? Light sliced around the edges of it, and she placed her hand on the door. It was warm and comforting. She didn't realize how cold she'd gotten, likely from the water. She thought about leaving, she thought about going home. Something was off, but she'd come out for a reason. She'd risk stepping out into the world where the virus roamed. She'd come here for connection. Nat squeezed the doorknob and turned. A trickle of text scrolled across the bottom of her vision. Error code 21. She shook her head. She didn't care what was real and what wasn't. This felt real, and she needed real connection. The bathroom door was silent. The club music was gone. A single woman sat on a toilet in the bathroom. The door to the stall was removed. Luckily, the woman wasn't using the toilet, though she did have some steampunk-looking VR goggles on. Without opening her mouth, she called to Nat. As she inched her skirt higher and higher, she told her that her name was Beth, that she'd been badly waiting for her to come. The lights flickered and the bathroom changed. The lights were dimmer, more atmospheric. Everything was spotless and clean. She was back to being Hero. He turned and reached for the doorknob, but it wasn't there. The entire door was gone. He turned back to the woman, who was now standing and approaching him, with the VR goggles still on, and her arms out in front of her, as if to protect herself in case she bumped into anything. Again, the lights flickered, and Nat was back. She checked for the door again. It was still not there, and the woman was now inches from her. She was beautiful, and exactly Nat's type. Beth asked if she could kiss her. Nat wanted to scream no. She wanted to run. She wanted to say yes. So she did, and Beth kissed her. Beth's back banged against the bathroom wall. Tile from the wall tumbled to the disgusting floor below. Her long hair swayed as the beautiful woman she'd met only minutes ago ran her fingers through it. Her lips felt so warm and comforting on her. It had been so long since she'd felt the touch of, well, anything. She wanted to be nowhere but right where she was. Beth wrapped her arms around Nat, spreading her warmth and her grip tightening on Nat. Beth kissed her hard, her tongue grazing her own. This was comfort, normalcy. She never wanted to leave here on her own. It had been so long, and Nat kept her eyes closed and enjoyed the feeling of Beth. As Nat collapsed back against the wall and onto the floor, Beth climbed off of her. She made her way to the sink and started to wash her hands, after which she removed her VR goggles and dropped them in the sink. She turned to smile at Nat, who was back to being Hero. The woman's face, where her eyes should be, was crystallized, and her actual eyes missing. She thanked Hero and directed him to a book she'd left for him in the bathroom stall. Some light reading, she said. Then, as if everything was normal, she walked across the bathroom and through the wall where the door used to be, leaving Hero alone. Again confused as to what was real and what wasn't, Hero got to his feet and rushed over to the book. He picked it up and read the title. The Guide to Getting the Fuck Out of Here and How to Seduce People in Order to Get Them to Take Your Place in Case You're Trapped Somewhere. Hero and Nat laughed, then pulled up their dating app and started sending party invitations. Newspaper headlines. Isolation can lead to a loss of connectivity with reality. Edmonton Epoch. Digital dating at an all-time low. Brightness Falls Gateway. Life without connection, not so different from a robot's life. Calgary Science Digest. Nat met a nice boy her mother would approve of. Nat's father's newsletter. Reports of people being held against their will after failed online dating on the rise. Lethbridge Dark Times. Conclusion from the narrator. That's it. Who knew that people needed actual, real connection with other people? And that given the lack of it can lead to questionable life choices, as much as some of us would like to admit. We're a social species. Hero and Nat, what is there to say about them? They needed connection. But the real question is, was it real? Were they? If I'm being honest with you, this one hurt my head and still does, but that could be the pills I'm taking. They keep pushing different things on me. I wish I could give you a clear picture, but sometimes life, like art, is messy.
Hey, my name is Vaughn Ashby. I wrote this. If you liked what you heard, head on over to VaughnAshby.com/free and pick up a free novel or a bunch of other free stuff. Go explore the Aurora Wasteland yourself at AuroraWasteland.com. Don't forget to check out the Stories from the Wasteland podcast and search for Vaughn Ashby on YouTube for video versions and other exciting videos. Thanks for listening.